Welcome back to the Golden Storyteller. Hi, this is your host Rex, and I'm here for another edition, another episode that we're publishing today, episode number three, to talk about stories from Golden. Today I'm going to talk about South Table Mountain. A lot of memories from South Table Mountain because I grew up in the shadow of it there in Colorado, and South Table Mountain is kind of a special place. If you look at here on the screen, if you're watching on YouTube, it was a fun place to be because it was so geographically unique. But let me give you a little bit of history about South Table Mountain before we get into my own personal stories, just to kind of update you on a little education about it. It's believed by archaeologists and geologists that the formations of these lava flows that created the castle and North and South Table Mountain were in the Paleocene lava flows that took place about 63 million years ago. The current height of these mesa, guess mountains, South Table Mountain, North Table Mountain, but South Table is 6,338 feet, which rises above the elevation of Golden, which is recorded at 5,675 feet. So they stand up about 663 feet. So it is fairly difference in geography. So they're very, very prominent in the area. It's in the times of the Native Americans who were living in the area. There have been artifacts that have been found up there from the Ute tribes, the Cheyenne, and the Arapaho. So it wasn't just a modern 20th century, 18th, 19th century, 20th century, and 21st century use of the hill and the mountain. It was actually being used for quite some time. The first recorded climb of the mountain was on February 14th by George Andrew Jackson and Thomas L. Golden, which Thomas L. Golden is the founder of Golden, and Golden is hence has his namesake. And they went up there looking to be able to scout out the area because Thomas Golden set up a mining camp in the summer of 1858, and so he hadn't had a chance to climb up there, so they went up there on a February day. It started to take some interesting use in the early 1900s. So in 1906, a gentleman by the and his of a father and son combination of William and Clyde Ashworth built the first Castle Rock Resort. It was a cafe that was located on the South Table Mountain, Castle Rock. And the access to that was from Burroughs. So if you wanted to go up to the cafe, it was kind of a unique escape from Denver to go on a burro ride up to the top into the cafe. Well, in 1907, in the off season in the winter, it was destroyed by vandals and abandoned by the Ashworth family. In 1908, Charles Quinnipiac started a new cafe up there, and he got it open in the late summer of 1908. In 1913, a dance hall, a lighthouse were added to the cafe up there. And so it became this landmark destination place. So from 1913 until about 1916, the dance hall and lighthouse and cafe flourished. But and when you went up the vernacular, the vernacular was built at that time, access. It was a 25-cent round trip ride. So can you imagine that? You can't even ride a bus anywhere in Colorado for that amount. But it was a 25-cent ride up to the top of the hill and back. That was the way to get up to the lighthouse and the cafe. Well, business started to fade, and that was basically primarily driven by the opening of the Denver Mountain Park System. Now, Denver is recognized worldwide for its park system because of the parks that were opened up in Genesee and even Winter Park, Red Rocks. So people in Denver escaped to there, and it was less attractive to go to the Castle Rock Resort and Dance Hall. So in the 1920s, it was abandoned, and what happened was the funicular is when the dance hall shut down about 1916, the rails for the cog railway up the mountain were actually recycled for the war effort in World War One. So the metal, the iron that was used for the tracks was actually taken down and recycled for that. Now, in the 1920s, the Ku Klux Klan took over the place up there. It was just abandoned, and they held a lot of meetings and conferences up there. So they took the trails from sort of on the southeastern side of the South Table Mountain up to there, and they were burning crosses, and they burned crosses up there for many, many years. Well, in 1927, the lighthouse, dance hall, and cafe were burned to the ground. And if you're watching on YouTube, the picture on the right here depicts the fire in 1927. And it was guessed that the arson who set the place afire to basically sort of hopefully get rid of the Ku Klux Klan's use of the hill to burn their facility to the ground. So you can see the smoke rising from the fire there. Um, in 1957, the first location that was considered for now what is Magic Mountain was on the top of Table Mountain. And since then, there have been lots of proposed uses of it. In 1998, Nike Corporation considered moving a second headquarters on the top, more on the northeastern end of it. And in fact, utilities were and water were drug clear up there in anticipation of Nike opening up a headquarters up there. So that was abandoned. But in the prior to that, the Colorado State Patrol opened up a firing range and a test driving track up there. And then the National Solar Research Institute is based on the south eastern side of South Table Mountain. Okay, so that's some brief history of the area. I thought it'd be kind of fun to share some of that because even people from Golden who grew up there and it was recognizable attraction may not even have paid attention to all that. So that's what it looks like today. If you're looking on the YouTube broadcast of this, that's the Castle Rock from South Table Mountain. Well, let me tell you some stories about this because it was really part of my youth. Well, one of my best friends at the time growing up is Warren. Now, in any of these storytellers, I'm not using anybody's last names because I don't want to expose their privacy. But if you grew up around when I did, you probably know who Warren is. Well, Warren's backyard was on South Table Mountain. Now, I lived across the street from South Table Mountain, so my neighbors directly across the street, their backyards backed up to South Table Mountain. Well, South Temple Mountain became kind of a playground for us. We were always up there. We climbed up that on a regular basis. The grade track or the grade incline for the funicular that was pulled out in the 19 for World War One still was in place. So it was a great trail to go right up to the edge of Castle Rock. And in fact, Warren's backyard right on the edge of it, you could see the grade. So it went right to his house pretty much. So it was a place we used to go all the time hiking up there. And at that time, the Castle Rock, actually the formation of the castle, it seemed like a long way down. So we would walk up there, hike up to the trail, and you could see the remnants of the funicular uh, turn house where they turn the cars around and the cable foundations. You could also see the where the fence used to be along the top of it when the dance hall and lighthouse. And then you could see the footings that were basically drilled into the top of the Castle Rock. So we went up there all the time. And funny story there that accumulates this. My friend Warren had these golden retrievers. Arfie and Ralphie. And so Ralphie was a fanatic about tennis balls. And so, of course, when we went hiking, we'd take Ralphie and Arfie with us and we'd go up to the top of South Table Mountain. Well, if you threw a tennis ball for Ralphie, she would just take off. I mean, just absolutely go flying. So one day we're up there, and I think Ben was with us. I'm not sure, but it may have been a handful of us, or it may have been just Warren and I. But I think in my memory served me well. It was the three of us, Ben, Warren, and myself, were up there. Well, we had been throwing the tennis ball towards not over the cliff of the Castle Rock, but basically back into the Table Mesa area because it's a big flat area. And Ralphie would go get it. Well, Ben, being the wise guy and comedian that he was, basically got the idea he'd throw the tennis ball off of the Castle Rock. So he wrestles the tennis ball away from Ralphie and chucks it over the edge of the Castle Rock. And we literally had to restrain Ralphie from jumping off the Castle Rock to go get the tennis ball. At that time, it seemed like a long ways down. I think, if my memory suits me now, the actual height of the Castle Rock is about 65 or 75-foot ledge. So it would be a pretty vicious fall. Now, when I was a kid, there were a couple times during the 70s where people fell off that. Never killed anybody, but seriously hurt them. So it would have been a bad place to fall off. But we spent a lot of time up at the Castle Rock. We'd sit on the edge, listening to the wind blow, looking out over the Valley of Golden, and enjoying the time up there. So a lot of great memories on the top. Now, because Warren's backyard uh, was on the edge of South Table Mountain, we had a great hill. So we used to set up sledding hills, and we basically took the trail that started to get up to the canal and made that into our sledding hill. Oh my goodness, I don't know what we were thinking about. We darn near killed ourselves. Now, the street that Warren lived on was Castle Rock Road, still exists. There's only three houses on it. So one of the prominent attorneys, Leo Bradley, lived in the first house at the bottom near the church. Warren's family lived in the second house, and then the Coors family had a house there up on the end. So there were just three houses. It was a dead end street. So the goal of sliding down the sledding hill was to make it into the street. And it was fairly safe just because there was never any traffic up there. So we'd get at the top and we would take a run and jump on the inner tubes and go down. And oh my goodness, we built a jump at the bottom and we doggone near hurt ourselves so many times. I can remember going home from sledding being so bruised and so beat up because I had basically crashed at the bottom of the hill. And it was, pavement under the snow, so it was not a soft landing. So we did a lot of sledding off of South Table Mountain in the summertime or in the wintertime. Now in the summertime, we played in the canal, and it's not operational anymore. But the Farmers Highline Canal, which was built in 1864, was a canal that took water from Clear Creek, a few miles up Clear Creek Canyon, and it ran along the base of Mount Zion, and it went around the outset edge of Golden, down underneath, and then it headed out toward Arvada. So snaking along the edge of South Table Mountain was a canal, and part of the canal was just a natural dugout dirt section, and then part of the canal was a half circle metal canal. That metal canal, the half circle metal canal, ran clear around past the Coors Brewery and over to the edge of the mountain. And you can still see remnants of it today. They didn't take it out as far as when they shut the canal down. But we used to get on inner tubes. And now what was interesting is the canal was probably on a half circle of about 6 feet. And then across the top to hold the canal into formation of these half circle metal pieces were looked like railroad ties, but they were by 4x4s. And you could take and walk along those if you wanted to, hop along, or when you got on the tube, you had to keep your head down so you weren't sitting upright, but you had to lay down, and you could ride the canal all the way down the tube. So we used to play in that canal all the time. We would start a few blocks to the southeast and ride the canal all the way through. And in the wintertime, we would go in there and throw the tennis ball down the canal and have Ralphie go chase it. And it had a heck of an echo. I mean, it would just echo like crazy. So the canal, it was built in I think it was 1864 is what I looked up, and it was built by the Arapahoe Ditch Company, which then the city of Golden partnered with later. But a lot of memories of hanging out and getting water out of the canal and playing in it. A couple of our neighbors across the street actually drilled pipes into the edge of the canal and watered their yards kind of illegally. They basically put pipes with a screen on the end of them, just window screen, and wired those up, and those pipes would bring water to their backyards in the summertime. Now, I don't have a picture of it here on the YouTube podcast, but there is a very famous section of South Table Mountain where there is the G that was painted for many, many years for Golden High School and Golden. So it used to be the tradition of Golden High School where the students would go up and repaint the G on the mountain. Because across the valley for the Colorado School of Mines on Mount Zion, they had the whitewashed M for mines. It was there and still is there, which is lit up with about 1,500 lights currently. Was there, so it was kind of a tradition. But the tradition pretty much stopped about 1979, 1980 of the continuous repainting, because in addition to painting the G, a lot of knuckleheads would go up there and paint graffiti and stuff, so it became an eyesore. So I think people kind of detracted that. So today, South Table Mountain is open to the public. It used to be owned by the family, the Quinn family, the wife of Leo Bradley, for the longest time, but I'm not sure if it was deeded over to the park system. But it is open; you can climb it anytime. The easiest access to the trails there are along East Street in Golden. In fact, 16th and East, there's a great trail to get into it. So yeah, South Table Mountain was a big part of my growing up. We spent a lot of time there, a lot of time sitting up at the top. I can remember looking out over Golden, sort of daydreaming about who we might be or what we might become. But it was a great resource to have kind of in our quote backyard, and we did all kinds of games and fun. Now, one summer, I forgot this one. I wanted to. There is we used to play with fireworks all the time. Now, when I grew up in the 70s and 80s, fireworks were illegal in Colorado. So we would get friends or older brothers and run up to Cheyenne, Wyoming, which is about 100 miles away, and buy illegal fireworks. So we would get to Warren's house, and in the backyard, we would have pop bottle rocket fights. Now, what the genius of that is, oh my goodness, it's amazing. We made it to our youth, out of our youth and into adulthood. But we would have pop ball rocket fights in the backyard. So you literally would take a pop ball rocket, put it in your hand, light it, and you'd aim it at your buddy. Or we would take small PVC pipes or lead pipes and use that as kind of the gun, so that way you could aim the pop ball rockets. Well, one day we were having a pop ball rocket fight, and sometimes they even went in the house. I can remember one time where Warren's older brother Pete actually shot off one in the house and got in the couch and burned a spot on the couch, and we had to hide it from his mom. And I'm sure when she finally found that, Sharon, when she finally found that, she was probably livid. But one day we're out having a pop ball rocket fight in the backyard, and we set the back of the mountain on fire. We were panicking. It wasn't a very big fire. We ended up getting it put out after about 10, 15 minutes, but it grew to an area that was probably 30 by 50 feet, so it wasn't very big at all in the whole perspective. But yes, I can claim I was an arsonist who accidentally set South Table Mountain on fire. Now, the wildlife around there, lots of deer, lots of mule deer. Occasionally, people talk about sightings of mountain lions, but it was mostly rabbits, a lot of rattlesnakes, mule deer, and coyotes that were found on South Table Mountain. In fact, my parents' home, at the corner of 15th and East, we would wake up and see the deer in the yard quite frequently, and the deer would come in and eat my mom's flowers, and it just used to make her crazy. So they had always hoped that someone would hunt there, but since there's really not much of a natural predator except for maybe the occasional mountain lion, it was an area that we saw quite a bit of wildlife, lots of birds and stuff. So yeah, that's my memories of South Table Mountain. I'm sure lots of my other friends might have some additional ones where we spent the time up there. But it was from a golden age in a golden period where Golden was still a great place to live, which it is still today. but it was an innocent time where kids could run around and have a lot of fun, and it was kind of an adventurous background. So until next time, thank you for listening to The Golden Storyteller. Tune in for the next stories, and we'll have some continuations on stuff for North Table Mountain and other geographic features of Golden. And until next time, we'll talk to you soon. This is Rex, your host.